She was sitting in the front row at the biggest creative industry awards night in Lagos. Nominated for Campaign of the Year. The lights dimmed. A presentation reel began playing on the giant screen. She recognized the first frame immediately. She recognized the second frame. By the third frame, something cold had started moving through her chest. Because that work on the screen was her work. Those concepts. Those angles. Those client relationships she had spent years building. Every single frame. But the logo in the corner of the screen was not her company's logo. And the woman walking up to receive the award was the woman she had protected for 5 years. The woman she had gone to war for. The woman she had chosen, again and again and again, when every person around her said to let go. Stay with me. Because this story is not just about betrayal. It is about the specific, devastating cost of giving your loyalty to the wrong person. And if this is the kind of story that reaches you, subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. I post every single week. And I promise you, you do not want to miss what comes next. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Her name was Adaeze Obi. And she did not build Vela Creative by accident. She built it the way most real things are built. Slowly. Painfully. With her own hands and nobody's permission. She grew up in Owerri, the third daughter of a secondary school principal and a seamstress who worked until midnight and woke up before 5. Her parents did not have money. But they had something that turned out to be more valuable than money. They had standards. Her father used to say, the quality of your work is your autobiography. People will read it whether you want them to or not. Adaeze never forgot that. At 25, she arrived in Lagos with a borrowed camera, a laptop with a cracked hinge, and the unshakable conviction that Nigerian brands deserve to be told as well as any story in the world. She started with wedding videos. Not because she wanted to. Because people would pay for them. She treated every wedding like a film premiere. She studied the light. She understood the family before she touched the camera. She captured not just the event, but the emotion underneath the event. People started talking. Then came brand content. Small businesses, startups, a cosmetics brand that couldn't afford a proper agency. Adaeze gave them cinema on a budget that had no right to produce cinema. People kept talking. By the time she was 32, Vela Creative had a proper studio in Lekki. Staff. Equipment. A client list that included some of the biggest consumer brands in Nigeria, a Pan-African telecom company, 2 government campaigns, and a growing reputation for the kind of storytelling that made audiences feel something they hadn't planned to feel. By 38, Vela Creative was not just a production house. It was a name that carried weight in the industry. The kind of weight that takes a decade to build, and a single wrong decision to damage. And that brings us to the decision that would cost Adaeze everything she was not prepared to lose. The decision to trust Kemi Suleiman. 5 years before the awards night, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, a young woman appeared at Vela Creative's reception with no appointment, no referral, and a printed portfolio tucked under her arm. Her name was Kemi Suleiman. 24 years old. Slim, precise, with the kind of eyes that were always calculating something, even when her face was smiling. She had been fired from her previous agency 3 months earlier. The official reason was creative differences. The real reason, which Adaeze would only learn later, was that the agency owner had taken Kemi's campaign concept, presented them to clients as his own, won the business, and then told Kemi she was too junior to have her name on the work. Kemi had complained. And she had been let go for it. Adaeze almost didn't see her that Tuesday. She had 3 deadlines, a client call that had been rescheduled twice, and a production budget that was giving her a headache she could feel behind both eyes. But her receptionist knocked and said, "There's a girl outside with a portfolio." She said she'll wait. Something in the way her receptionist said she'll wait made Adaeze look up. She went out. She looked at the portfolio for 8 minutes. Then she looked at Kemi. "Who took your ideas?" she asked. Kemi blinked. "Excuse me." "This work," Adaeze said, tapping the portfolio. "The thinking behind this is real. But some of these executions don't match the thinking. Someone else finished what you started." Kemi was quiet for a long moment. Then she told her everything. Adaeze listened. When Kemi was done, Adaeze offered her a junior creative position and told her to start the following Monday. It was not a sentimental decision. Adaeze had seen the thinking behind Kemi's stolen work. She had seen the instinct, the raw commercial intelligence, the ability to find the emotional core of a brand story quickly and build outward from it. She recognized it because she had it herself. And she knew what happened to that kind of talent when it was repeatedly taken from without being given anything back. It either died or it became dangerous. Adaeze was not interested in either outcome. She gave Kemi a chance. And for the first year, it looked like the best decision she had ever made. Kemi was exceptional at her job. She was fast, instinctive, and had the rare ability to walk into a client briefing, listen for 20 minutes, and come out with an idea that the client didn't know they wanted until they heard it. Within 8 months, she had been promoted twice. Within 18 months, she was leading campaigns. Within 2 years, she had her own team. But with the success came a personality that required management. Kemi was brilliant. She was also blunt to the point of damage, impatient with anyone she considered slow, and occasionally dismissive of clients in ways that created problems Adaeze had to solve personally. And Adaeze solved them. Every single time. When a major consumer goods client threatened to pull their account because Kemi had told their marketing director in a meeting that his brief was written by someone who did not understand their own product, Adaeze flew to their headquarters in Port Harcourt. She spent 4 hours rebuilding the relationship. She brought the account back. She did not tell Kemi what it had cost her. When a senior producer at Vela spread rumors that Kemi was slipping her way into her position, Adaeze called a full staff meeting and addressed it directly, in front of everyone, without naming the producer. But everyone knew who she was talking to. The rumors stopped. When Vela's 2 early investors began questioning whether Kemi's profile was growing too large relative to the company's brand, suggesting that Kemi might one day become a competitor rather than an asset, Adaeze told them flatly that talent required investment, and that short-sighted protection of position was how companies stopped being excellent. The investors were not satisfied. Adaeze did not care. When Kemi needed the most advanced editing suite Vela had ever purchased, Adaeze approved the budget personally. When Kemi wanted her name on the awards entries for campaigns she had led, Adaeze put it there, even when industry convention at the time was to list the company name only. She gave Kemi credit in rooms Kemi had never entered. She defended Kemi's name to people Kemi had never met. She was not doing this out of naivety. She was doing it because she believed, with the complete certainty of someone who had been young and overlooked and brilliant herself, that this was what good leadership looked like. Protecting the people whose potential others were too comfortable to recognize. She believed this completely. Right up until the night the screen in that awards venue lit up. Later, after everything, Adaeze would sit alone in her office and go back through the last 18 months like someone reviewing footage of an accident, trying to find the exact frame where the mistake happened. She would find many frames. Kemi had started arriving late. Not consistently, not enough to address formally, but enough to notice. Adaeze had told herself Kemi was a creative. Creatives kept their own hours. She had built her own company by ignoring the conventional working day. She would not penalize a woman for the same independence that had built her own reputation. Kemi had started taking calls outside. Long ones. Standing in the car park, pacing slowly, back turned to the building. Adaeze had noticed twice and looked away both times. She valued privacy. She expected her staff to extend the same to each other. Kemi had started asking questions. Detailed ones. About client contract structures. About the pricing model for different production scales. About supplier relationships and how the retainer agreements worked. About the legal structure of Vela's intellectual property ownership. Adaeze had answered all of them. She had answered them the way a mentor answers a student. Fully. Honestly. With the specific generosity of someone who believes that the more a person knows, the more useful they become to the whole. She had not asked why Kemi wanted to know. Because she had told Kemi, from the very beginning, that one day she should build something of her own. That the goal was not to stay at Vela forever, but to grow to the point where she could stand somewhere of her own. So when Kemi showed curiosity about how things worked, Adaeze had read it as preparation. She had not read it as intelligence gathering. There had been one moment. A client, a pan-Nigerian insurance brand, had called Adaeze to say they had been contacted by a production company she had never heard of, with a pitch that was, in the client's words, strikingly similar to the proposal Vela had submitted to them 6 weeks earlier but not yet been awarded. Adaeze had followed up. The production company had not responded to her inquiry. The insurance brand had eventually awarded the project to a third company entirely. Adaeze had noted it, filed it under coincidence, and moved on. She would not file it under coincidence again. The Lagos Creative Industry Awards. The biggest night of the year for production, advertising, and brand storytelling in Nigeria. Adaeze was at table 7 in a gold-lit ballroom in Victoria Island. She was wearing a deep burgundy gown that had been altered twice to fit correctly. She had a glass of water she had not touched. She was nominated for Campaign of the Year, for a financial services campaign that had run on national television and generated the highest brand recall score the client had ever recorded. Kemi was also at the event. She was at table 14, with a group Adaeze did not recognize. Adaeze had noticed her when they arrived. Had waved. Kemi had waved back and smiled, then turned away. Adaeze had thought nothing of it. The ceremony moved through its categories. Best Documentary. Best Social Media Campaign. Best Visual Identity. Then Campaign of the Year. The Master of Ceremonies' voice dropped into the reverent register that award ceremonies use when they want to signal that what is coming matters. The lights dimmed. A reel began on the giant screen behind the stage. The first frame was a woman walking through a market at dawn. Adaeze recognized the woman immediately. She had cast her. She had stood in that market at 4 in the morning for that shot because the light only did what she needed it to do for 11 minutes, between 4 and 4:11 a.m. The second frame was a child looking up at a skyscraper. Adaeze had written that image herself, on a napkin in a client's meeting, 3 years ago. The third frame. The fourth. The fifth. Every single one. Then the logo appeared in the bottom right corner of the screen. Ochora Creative. Adaeze had never heard that name before. She looked up from the screen. She looked at table 14. Kemi Suleiman was already standing, walking toward the stage. In a white blazer. Smiling. Adaeze did not stand up. She did not call out. She did not walk to the stage. She sat completely still. She watched Kemi Suleiman walk up to the podium and receive an award for work that Adaeze's team had conceptualized, shot, and completed. Work that had been produced in Vela's studio, on Vela's equipment, by people Vela had trained. She listened to Kemi's acceptance speech. Kemi thanked the industry. She thanked her team. She thanked her mentors, without naming them, in the careful, deliberate way of someone who has rehearsed the omission. She did not look at table 7. Not once. Adaeze stayed until the end of the ceremony. She applauded the other winners. She spoke to the people at her table. She collected her nominee certificate for Campaign of the Year, which she had not won, and put it in her bag. Then she drove home. She did not cry in the car. She did not call anyone. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and she opened a search engine. And she typed the name she had seen on that screen. Ochora Creative. The website was well built. Professional. Clean. The kind of design that does not announce itself loudly but communicates, through every detail, that the people behind it know what they are doing. Adaeze read it the way she read everything. Slowly. Carefully. Looking beneath the surface for the structure. The campaign portfolio was the first thing that made her jaw tighten. She recognized 7 pieces of work across 12 campaigns. Not similar work. Not work done in the same style. Her work. Reframed, retitled, presented under Ochora's name with different client logos. 2 of the clients listed on the Ochora website were clients who had quietly ended their relationship with Vela over the past year. Adaeze had put the endings down to budget cycles and industry consolidation. She could see now that they had not ended. They had simply moved. She found Ochora Creative's registration documents through the Corporate Affairs Commission portal. The company had been registered 19 months ago. 1 month after Kemi Suleiman had asked Adaeze to explain how Vela's intellectual property agreements with clients were structured. She found 2 names in the company documents that she recognized. Junior staff members from Vela. Both still on Vela's payroll. Both had apparently been working for Ochora on the side, bringing production knowledge, client context, and internal information with them. She sat back in her chair. It was 2:47 in the morning. The kitchen was quiet. She thought about the client in Port Harcourt she had flown to see. The investors she had argued down. The producer she had publicly corrected to protect Kemi's reputation. She thought about every room she had entered and fought in with Kemi's name on her tongue. She thought about every room she had left Kemi alone in. And she understood, at 2:47 in the morning, with a calm that was colder than anger, that those were not the same rooms. They never had been. She called Kemi in at 9 a.m. She did not show the documents immediately. She asked Kemi to sit down. She offered her tea. Kemi accepted and sat with the careful composure of someone who is not sure what they are walking into, but is already preparing an exit route. Adaeze asked her how the awards night had gone. Kemi said it was a good evening. Adaeze nodded. Then she placed the printed Ochora Creative website, with the registration documents and the campaign portfolio, on the desk between them. Kemi looked at them. She did not deny. That, somehow, was the worst part. There was no performance of innocence. No elaborate explanation. No tears. Kemi looked at the documents, then looked at Adaeze, and something behind her eyes shifted from careful to honest, for the first time in what Adaeze now understood had been a very long time. You always told me to build something of my own, Kemi said. I did, Adaeze said. So I built it. The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. Then Adaeze asked the only question she actually needed answered. When were you going to tell me? Kemi said nothing. And that nothing told Adaeze everything. She had not been a mentor being given the gift of watching a protege grow. She had been a resource. A cover. A shield. A reputation to stand behind while something else was being built in the shadow of it. Adaeze looked at Kemi for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "You should leave now." And she meant the building. And she meant her life. She did not post about it. She did not go to industry people with the story. She did not perform her pain in any room where anyone could watch. She did 3 things. First, she engaged a lawyer. A letter went to Ochora Creative documenting every piece of misappropriated work, every client relationship that had been approached using Vela's confidential information, and every breach of the non-disclosure agreement Kemi had signed on her first day. The letter was specific. It was detailed. It was devastating in its precision. Second, she called every client Kemi had taken. Not to beg. Not to explain. To tell the truth simply and professionally and let them make their own decision with full information. Most of them came back to Vela within 3 months. Not because Adaeze had asked them to. Because the truth, when it is told cleanly and without drama, has a particular weight that manipulation cannot match. Third, she sat with her 2 early investors, the ones who had warned her about Kemi 2 years earlier, and she told them they had been right. This was the hardest thing she did. Not because she was ashamed of having been wrong, but because she understood what it had cost them all for her to find out through a ballroom screen, rather than through her own discernment. The investors did not say, "I told you so." They said, "What do you need?" And Vela Creative, which had been quietly destabilized from the inside for 19 months, began the slow work of rebuilding what had been taken. It was not fast. It was not painless. But it was real. People ask, after a betrayal like this, what the person who was betrayed did wrong. And that question, however well-intentioned, carries a cruelty inside it. Because Adaeze Obi had not done anything wrong. She had done something human. She had seen talent that reminded her of herself. She had seen it being taken advantage of, and she had recognized that taken advantage of, because she had survived her own version of it. And she had made the decision that some people are worth protecting, even when protection is costly. What she had not yet learned was the difference between someone who needs protection, and someone who is using your protection as infrastructure for something they are building at your expense. That difference is not always visible from the outside. Sometimes it only becomes clear from the inside of a ballroom, at 2 a.m, in front of a screen showing your work under someone else's name. And the cost of learning it that way is not small. It is 5 years of loyalty. It is every room you entered saying someone else's name. It is the specific grief of realizing that the version of the relationship you believed in was never the version the other person was in. Adaeze sat with that grief. She let herself feel it fully, privately, without performing it for anyone. Then she got back to work. Because the only answer to being emptied by the wrong person is to refill yourself with purpose. And purpose, unlike trust, is something you cannot have taken from you. 2 years after the awards night, Vela Creative won Campaign of the Year. Adaeze accepted the award in a midnight blue dress. Her speech was 45 seconds long. She thanked her team. She thanked her clients. She thanked the 2 investors who had told her the truth when the truth was uncomfortable. She did not mention Kemi Suleiman. Not because she had forgiven and forgotten, but because the most complete response to someone who used your protection as a ladder is to simply keep climbing your own. In the car home that night, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Congratulations. You deserved it." She looked at the number for a long time. Then she put her phone face down on the seat. And she drove home in the quiet. There was nothing left to say. The story had already said everything. Be careful, not just about who you trust. Be careful about who you protect. Because protection given freely is one of the most powerful things one human being can offer another. It can change the entire trajectory of a person's life. But it requires something in return that cannot be forced and cannot be faked. It requires that the person being protected understands what they are receiving and chooses to receive it honestly. Not as a resource. Not as cover. Not as a shortcut into a room that is not yet theirs. The most painful thing about Adaeze's story is not that Kemi was calculating. The most painful thing is that the protection was real. Every argument Adaeze had ever made on Kemi's behalf was genuine. Every sacrifice was actual. She had not been performing loyalty. She had been living it. And sometimes, the people who love and protect most completely are also the ones who take longest to see what is being done to them. Because they are busy doing the thing they believe in. And the person they believe in is busy doing something else entirely. So be careful. Be wise. Not cold. Not closed. But wise. Because your loyalty is not small. Your protection is not cheap. And the people who receive it should be the ones who understand what it cost. If this story hit you somewhere real, drop a comment right now. Tell me, which moment was the hardest to sit with? The award screen. The kitchen at 2:47 in the morning. The moment Kemi said nothing when Adaeze asked when she was going to tell her. Tell me. I genuinely read every single one. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it now. Hit the notification bell. Because next week I'm dropping a story about a woman who was told for 20 years she was not qualified enough, not polished enough, not the right fit. And then one morning she walked into a room, and every person who had said those things to her was sitting on the other side of the table, waiting for her to decide their fate. You do not want to miss that one. Subscribe now. I will see you there.